recording. So, welcome everyone to this discussion, this workshop. It's commissioned by the European Investment Bank in conjunction with the city of Walbrzych, organised by LSE and myself, Bert Proven, and our Polish partners, the Institute of Urban and Regional Development in Warsaw and other places. The translators are Greg Piatkowski and Paulina Poetkowski, so welcome to them too. I'm grateful to Alison Partridge from the Urbact Tech Town expert, who's the expert for that, Tracy Johnson from Barnsley, welcome, and Bella Ketz from Naireghara, a town which he told me would take 20 years to learn how to pronounce properly. So there have been documents sent out in advance, and I presume you've all seen them. All the presentations have been translated. In a minute, Walbrzych will lead off by presenting what it wants to say about its initiative to create this kind of IT hub in the city. Then Alison and Tracy will present, and then Bella will give an account of what it's like in a different Eastern European country, in Hungary, to do this kind of work. So we've got a contrast between Barnsley in Western Europe and Bela in his city in Eastern Europe. I'll be keeping an eye on the time for presentations. So it'll be about 10 minutes from Walbrzych and 20 minutes and from Tracy and Alison, and then 10 minutes from Bella, and then we'll have discussion after that. Can you all keep yourself muted if you're not speaking, please? Otherwise, we'll hear you eating crisps or receiving phone calls or things like that. If you want to speak, go to participants and raise your hand, little blue hand. And I will then spot that, and I'll probably send you a message saying, I see you. Or if I'm not listening to you, just interrupt, unmute yourselves and interrupt and say, Bert, I want to speak. I hope everyone will be free to ask challenging questions, any questions you like. It's being recorded. It may be put in the web. The bank will be watching these workshops as well. So just be aware that other people will be watching, but that's great. And so that's all I have to say by way of introduction. So I'll now invite Camille to lead off. Thank you, Camille.
Thank you very much, Bert. And I'm really happy that we're able to meet today, however, only remotely, because, well, that will definitely help us get some knowledge how projects that we want to implement, that we want to create, how did it work or has it been working in other places? Thank you very much, Professor, for organizing this meeting, and thank you, our experts, our guests, for coming to the meeting and then sharing the knowledge with us, the very precious thing, of course. I'll start briefly with a brief introduction. We've sent you the materials. What are our aims? What are our goals about the business incubator? But let me maybe just say a few words about Walbrzych itself, about its characteristic features, and what are the issues, problems we're struggling with currently in relation to the topic. Of course, focusing on the operation of the future business incubator that we are, let's say, right now beginning to implement. I wanted to tell you what have we done so far, and as you could see maybe on the presentation, there are questions we will have for you. How is it working? How has it worked for you? What kind of advice would you give us in our specific context? So we have, outside of me, outside of myself, we have Mr. Andrzej Kosiur, the development manager, development department manager. He is also the coordinator of the project of IT Hub. We also have Ms. Martyna Dąbrowska, a person also from our department, especially involved in the logistics of the project, also the preparing the concept itself and studies related to it, and also Ms. Karolina Usarek, uh, dealing with helping, supporting local entrepreneurs in the city. We also have from Wałbrzych, Mr. Andrzej Łoziński. This is Dell, so the chairman of the Economy Development Council, a body that is supposed to provide advice and opinion to the mayor of Wałbrzych in this respect. So let me start sharing the screen. Hopefully I can do that already. Yes.
Nie wiem, czy widać? I teraz tak, jeszcze pokaz slajdów, gdzie to, żebym to ja wziął. Pokaz slajdów jest. To dwa słowa.
So, a couple of things about the city.
Co to za miasto Wałbrzych? To jest miasto średnie.
We are a medium-sized city situated in the southwestern part of Poland, close to the Czech and German borders. We have over 100,000 residents, second biggest in the region, Lower Silesia, that is apart from its capital, Wrocław. What are the main features of our city? I think the biggest determinant of the city is that we are post-mining city. In the 60s and 70s, we've experienced the biggest increase in coal mining, hard coal mining in the city. Then the mines were closed down in the 90s, which resulted, they were closed down very quickly, which resulted in a huge crisis, over 30% of unemployment rate. That is why Wałbrzych was selected as one of these cities to one of the areas to place the special economic zone in. And right now in the zone, there are 17 big companies. Toyota is the biggest one, and they commonly employ dozens of thousands of employees. Our strengths, besides of this beautiful photo you can see, we are situated in the mountains. So most of the city, there's most of the city limits is green. The area in the city limits is green, as you can see, like that. What would be our strength in this context, in the context of creating entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial environment? We have very good high schools, junior high schools, senior high schools, also vocational and technical schools. We are quite strong in that. So secondary education, all in all. Our schools are very high in rankings, and they are shaping very well, shaping the graduates very well. Our secondary schools graduates get to the best universities in Warsaw, Krakow, and Wrocław. Let me move on to the challenges now. There are numerous, of course, but I would like to focus on those that would be useful for the context of creating such a business incubator. So first and foremost, as many cities in Poland, also in Europe, we're struggling with depopulation. In the 90s, we had 130,000 citizens. The forecast says that in the next 2 decades, we will go down to 80,000 citizens. People after secondary schools, when they graduate, they usually leave to study at the bigger university, usually, well, in a bigger city. So we're experiencing the brain drain of creative people, first by universities, then by bigger corporations. The biggest attractor of such people would be Wrocław. Of course, there are some people that return after finishing their education on an academic level. They return, but most people, I would say, stereotypically stay in Wrocław. we don't have to struggle with unemployment, as we said. It got down from 30% in the 90s of the previous century to 5%, and this is pre-pandemics uh, information. So we are around the national average. What is our problem is the quality of workplaces. Usually there are uh, manufacturing workplaces in one of the bigger, so working on, on an assembly line, for example, in the bigger company in the special economic zone. This is the majority. Of course, Mr. Andrew, he is going to be probably showing us some good and creative companies that is also located in the city, requiring more qualifications, but it's still too few. It's not enough. So simple menial jobs are predominant in the city. Also, if we have enterprises, small micro enterprises, sole traders, these are usually services, not IT or creative, innovative businesses. So compared to other cities of this size, the amount of innovative um, enterprises is a lot lower per 1,000 inhabitants than in other comparable cities. And the last point is important here, I think, as well, that citizens don't like taking the risk of setting up their own business. They prefer to have a stable job, from 9 to 5 job, than to risk setting up their own business, which was also a result of our history, I think. In the 60s and 70s and 80s, the city was mostly populated by miners and their families, so supported by by the state, and there's no traditions of there are no traditions of being of this entrepreneurial spirit. The shops were well provided. The mine provided all the services, all the benefits, well paid job. The job was well paid, so you did not have to do a lot to earn money, to make a living, basically. And taking all that into account, let me speed things up now. We started an idea. Well, we realized that in order to keep these young people well educated, or to convince them to return if they have to leave to study, to convince them to come back to Walbrzych, to start their own business here, we need to provide them a space so that they can develop their ideas, so that they can create their companies, make a living doing that, and develop it on a regional, national, or international scale. This is, of course, our vision, very ambitious, uh, our dream, I have to say. Right now, it's in the level of dreams. There have been some initiatives we've conducted. We've conducted, for example, 2 software hackathons, 48 hours competition. Were expecting maybe 30 participants, 5 to 10 teams. The first hackathon had 150 participants, 30, 40 different teams. And this is where we experienced the creative pool and the innovative pool that we have in the city. And that was really surprising and really nice to see for us. Then in the old mine park, which is a revitalized coal mine, also hosts a venue, a space called City Lab. You will be able to see it in the next slide. Oh, here it is. And young people have 70, 80 square meters of space to meet, to develop their businesses. They have a coach, a mentor there to help them with their ideas, IT apps, for example. You can see what kind of activities can be done there. Right now, the place is finished, has been finished, and right now we're at the moment of selecting an operator that would manage that venue. In 2018, we also entered into an agreement with Nokia. Nokia in Wrocław, for example, employs about 8,000 employees, one of the biggest shared services center in Europe. And mainly dealing with creating new app and then servicing clients, customers, businesses. So Nokia came up to us, along with our, in cooperation with us, they came up with the idea of signing an agreement, conducting classes for secondary school children, teaching them IT, teaching them coding, software developing. Last year, along with Google, we created for 20, 30-year-olds, mostly at least, there were 50 participants there. We've created design thinking workshops. A really great thing. I really enjoyed it as we also participated in that. So Google coaches, Google employees showed how to approach ideas differently, how to think outside the box, how how can people have creative solutions, thinking outside of the box, thinking, working together. And the last stage that has been in creation, or at least in development from 2016, is to create this Walbrzych business incubator. It's in the very center of town, the district that is right now broadly revitalized. Uh, in the old city center, because Wałbrzych has two centers. Northern part with new housing estates where most people live, and older parts where with the city center, historical part with majority majority of buildings erected before 1945. So we selected one building, a former school, 900 square meters, and this is right now under development to be adapted as a business incubator. We've assumed that a minimum of 12 companies needs to be incubated in there for it to be viable. Different industries, but we want to focus. It will be mostly office space, not specialized labs or bigger halls with assembly lines for experiments. It's mostly about developing soft, creative companies. So the value, as you can see, over 1.5 million euro, out of which half was funded by the EU. And then I think I'm running out of time, so I would like to move on to the questions that
Yeah, you could.
we have for
It's
you.
fine. You've got a couple. Just have another minute.
Yeah, so these are the things we would like to know before we start. And you know that our goal is right now to either retain or attract as many people as possible. So in the second half of the year, um, we will start competitions, tenders for operators, for example. So we want to select them as well as possible. We invite both local and uh, and from outside of the region entities. So we want to get some ideas, and based on those, we want to build a documentation, an action plan that will then be the basis for our tender. In all in all, so at the end of the first quarter of 2021, the operator can enter the new building and start recruiting companies and for supporting, for incubating. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much indeed, Camille. That was very comprehensive and helpful. So could you take your screen down? No, that's great. Thank you. That's given lots of good questions. So let's just move straight on to Tracy and Alison, and whichever one of you is starting, and you can share your screen or whenever you're ready. So
I think that's me, or are you doing it? You're doing it. Cool. Even better. Okay. Can't hear you, Tracy.
Tracy, you have to.
Sorry, I went into full screen a bit too quickly, so apologies for that. I'll just reshare it.
While you're doing that, I'll just introduce us, or me. I think you know quite a lot about why we're here. So Tracy and I, with Bella, ran a network of medium-sized cities called Tech Town between 2015 and 2018. And this was funded through the European programme URBACT. So we're going to tell you a little bit about the network, and come back to your questions at the end with regard to the specific points around incubation and workspace. So if we move on to the next slide, I'm just going to start with reminding us what the sort of key challenges were. So we were working with 10 or 11, I think 11 medium-sized towns.
11, yeah.
They were all different. We found it very difficult to define what we meant by digital and tech, and I think we kind of concluded very quickly that it shouldn't be seen as a vertical, that actually it kind of cuts across pretty much everything we do. So we concluded that digital is everywhere. However, we did do some work, if we move on to the next slide, trying to look at how digital is defined in other areas. So this is an extract from a UK report back in 2016. And obviously things have evolved a long way even since then. But the general conclusion is, and this is a quote from the European Commission, the digital economy is everywhere. It has continued and will continue to transform the economy in terms of productivity and connectivity, especially for SMEs. So we work really hard to help our medium-sized towns understand what they meant locally when they were talking about tech and digital. And I think it's really important that every different country, every different region, and even every different town might have a very different interpretation. And we accepted that. We thought that was important, that there wasn't a kind of top-down definition of what digital and tech meant to the cities involved in the network. But what we were clear on from the beginning is that tech and digital, however it was defined, offered enormous potential in terms of size and economic growth. If we move to the next slide. So these numbers, again, are slightly outdated, and I won't dwell on this slide. I expect you know a lot of this information, and you've got the slide in front of you. But probably the one back then that surprised us the most when we did the research was point 4. So these are the sort of indirect jobs that are created for every job created in high-tech industries. And I think particularly in post-industrial, medium-sized towns and cities, this is a really important point. Because not every job in tech and digital will be knowledge-based. They probably will be higher quality than the many manual or industrial jobs, but they do actually, there is this kind of multiplying effect, which is great. So moving on to the next slide, at the beginning of the work that we did, Tracy and I visited each of the 11 towns and cities. I wrote a very long baseline study. And these are this is the sort of headline challenges when it came to medium-sized cities, growing a digital economy, growing a tech ecosystem. And a lot of these resonate with some of the things that you've already touched upon in your town in Poland. So this mismatch between the people who live locally and the jobs that tech and digital might create, this lack of innovation and entrepreneurial culture. In some places, there was definitely a continued problem with digital infrastructure. It relies very heavily on infrastructure. And also there were problems with unequal access to skills development, digital technologies, and that sort of thing. And I think probably the other 3 are more around the role of the public sector. We did a lot of work on what's the role of the city, and we'll come on to this again at the end of the presentation. But basically the sort of speed and the way that the public sector and local government works in most European countries doesn't really match the way that the tech world works. So there's a bit of a mismatch in terms of the cultures between those 2 sectors. We'll move on. I'm very conscious of the time. We've got a lot to get through. So at our final event in 2018, we tried to distill some of the key factors, the key kind of components, the ingredients of a tech town. So Tracy's going to take us through the first of these, and we're going to bounce back between the two of us.
Yes, we're going to play presentation ping pong. So I think, this, following on from Camille, your presentation and the questions at the end of it, I think, that taking that step away slightly from the pure building opportunity that kind of many towns have, that was quite crucial to our tech town journey. And our starting point was really trying to look through some very particular lenses at the opportunities that medium-sized cities have around tech, digital, creative industry, knowledge-based jobs. And the 4 things that we looked through were, as on the slide, sort of looking at talent. Where do the people that can fill these roles come from? Understanding digital. Alison mentioned, this huge definition of what is digital, and actually being able to articulate what does digital mean for our city, what's our interpretation of what digital is, basically. We looked also through the lens of digital jobs, because that was ultimately something that we were all trying to facilitate the creation of. And then the 4th lens was the role of governance. What can a city do? What difference can a city make? Particularly when you're working with an industry that's by its very nature disruptive, that some of the biggest global companies have disrupted governance in effect in terms of their products and models. So those were the 4 lenses that we tried to focus on throughout the programme. And over 2 years, we really tried to get under the skin of these areas. Sorry, bear with me. And the conclusions we came to by the final event were a series of kind of the things that a tech town has. So the activities that we undertook as a partnership helped us to really understand what are the components that you can begin to bring together to ensure that you can have a really strong chance of success in this economy as a city. And one of the first ones we identified was that a tech town has open workspaces. Now that means open in a more philosophical sense than in a, literally the doors opening and people being able to go in. It's a mindset thing. I think key is that it's for and with the digital community, however small that community might be. The animation of workspaces by those people is absolutely critical. Workspaces cover a range of themes. They can be incubators, but also accelerators, so programs and spaces that can speed up how quickly companies can get to market. Co-working spaces, which again enables that community feel. It's more flexible, it's a lower cost entry point. A key factor in these spaces is design. Well-designed spaces make a difference, they can affect behaviour. Co-location, so in Barnsley in particular, having business support people located in the same place as businesses means that relationship's very fluid and soft and really becomes a partnership. And I think the crucial thing was really that spaces are just spaces. When you think more through the idea of places, you get that sense of community, you get that sense of what the city is about, and that articulation of that difference is quite crucial. Nobody wants to be an anywhere town. We want the personalities of our places to come through in what we do. So back to you, Alison.
Sure. So we tried from there to think about what the role of the city might be in terms of the sort of medium-sized city. And I think the main conclusion, and this is something that has evolved also since our subsequent work with other cities, is the building is important, but it's definitely not the most important thing. The community is way more important. And what the city can do in terms of growing the community is not good enough just to build a building. It's about sort of changing the culture, providing collaborative leadership. So leading from the front, but really enabling the local tech entrepreneurs, and there will be some, as you said, through your hackathons and things like that. enabling them to also take the initiative, because ultimately these buildings will survive or fail, you know, depending on their use, and the people who use them need to grow them. So that was one of our really important findings. But obviously the city can also help with funding. You have a lot of buildings. Many times there are redundant buildings that can actually be quite cheaply repurposed and used as inexpensive tech hubs. A lot of tech entrepreneurs simply need a space and a desk, and probably the coffee is more important than the space and the desk or the design. And also, as Tracy said, I think it's very important, and some of the most successful hubs have co-located other public services. So not necessarily not necessarily the specialist services like business support, some of the things that Tracy talked about, but in the Digital Media Centre in Barnsley, they also have kind of artwork, community events, and very much a sort of open door policy. So it's very much embedded into the cultural and physical makeup of the city centre, and I think that's also quite an important distinction when it comes to what the sort of attitude of public servants, and what difference that makes to the use of a space. So we'll move on now to talent. We also, obviously, I think it was really great to see your slides and to hear about your city, and so much of it felt very familiar with the conversations that we've had with many medium-sized cities across Europe. And I think one of the key things when it comes to talent, and digital talent in particular, is that some of these people can pretty much work anywhere. They can choose to work anywhere, through their back bedroom, in Thailand, wherever it may be. As long as they've got decent Wi-Fi, they can work anywhere. So actually the lifestyle offer becomes much more important. I haven't been to your city, but I have been close to it, and it is a beautiful part of the world. Your photographs look beautiful. So I think all of that really helps in terms of the lifestyle offer. You talked about the brain drain. Some of the towns and cities involved in Tech Town ran very successful alumni programs where they actually used people who had left the city to be kind of ambassadors and to promote the city in the capital city of that country, and sort of encourage people to come back or to relocate back to the city. Successful tech towns also have local programs which can hack into the national curriculum. So quite often it's impossible to affect the national curriculum when it comes to teaching, but it's perfectly possible to do after school clubs or teen tech kind of events or evening things, or to, like you're doing with your youth centre, or the centre that's for young entrepreneurs. It's perfectly possible to do something alongside and different and disruptive when it comes to education. And this is where you'll start to grow and nurture the local talent and encourage people to want to stay. So it's about retaining and attracting and also rewarding existing talent in your city. And obviously, particularly young people, you know, they don't necessarily chime or resonate with people in suits. They love the idea of going to work. They are able to go to work in jeans. You take them around a centre that's got a ping pong table. They're like, oh, this is a different way of working. This isn't like my parents or my uncle or whatever it might be. So I think things like that are all very, very important when it comes to tech entrepreneurship. It is a different way of working. It's a very different environment, some good, some bad, but it's not traditional. And everything that a city does to attract and grow the digital nomads or tech entrepreneurs should not be traditional. It's different, and it needs to be different. So back to Tracy now in terms of some of the lessons, some of the sort of more practical sides of that.
So yeah, so what can you do as a medium-sized city? I think there's a huge amount that cities can do to facilitate that digital community. It's not about leading the community, it's about creating the opportunities for that community to really be more visible and more active. So medium-sized and smaller cities can really learn from larger counterparts, but as Alison said, the lifestyle opportunity presented by medium-sized cities, you know, beautiful green spaces or lower costs for housing. For some entrepreneurs, these are really, really attractive things. And not every entrepreneur is a 25-year-old Silicon Valley type hip, cool, trendy person. Lots of entrepreneurs are, you know, older than that, or have families, or want to be in a particular location. They want to be able to cycle and live their lives how they want to. And I think a really interesting example is how Estonia, for example, is a very small country, really promotes its tech opportunities off the back of having a very good lifestyle opportunity. So it's quite a powerful draw, but you really have to focus your market. As Alison said again, you know, attracting that alumni back, it's presenting your city as viable and understanding what will push the buttons, what will attract people, and being able to articulate that well. On a more sort of practical day-to-day level, there is a need for cities to engage with the whole community, to better understand their skills as they exist, but also their skills and talent needs. So actually, where do you want to be? What are the ambitions? And how can we make that more aspirational? Really reaching out and building that relationship with young people in particular as they come through education, to understand lifestyle and career priorities and opportunities. So starting that conversation quite early, and using the fact that as cities, as municipalities, we have to work with schools and with education. It's part of our portfolio of what we do. So utilise that knowledge base to inform the next steps, really, and really get under the skin of what digital companies want and need. This idea that digital companies need talent that is qualified to the highest level is wrong. Often what digital companies want to do is bring talent through, and they will take people at a lower qualification level with aptitude and enthusiasm and develop them in the style of their business, because that's just how they want to work. And I think, you know, reiterating this, the cultural capital, the experience of being part of a digital community should be enjoyable. It should be fun. It should be something attractive and powerful. That's definitely something that cities can help to do, rather than positioning tech and digital as something over there and not very easy to understand. It has to be really embraced and brought into a bit of a cuddle at city level.
The next slide is about finance, and I'll probably go through this quite quickly. Ideally, and this is not easy for medium-sized towns and cities, and Tracy will say a little bit more about what they can do, tech entrepreneurs will have access to finance at every stage. So from pre-seed right the way through to when they want to scale up, hoping that they stay that long. And this is quite difficult, I think, for medium-sized cities, but there are examples of medium-sized cities setting up co-investment funds and similar. And I think it's also important not to forget public sector funding, and to remember that the public sector tends to be a very big buyer, tends to have quite big purchasing power locally, and they can also be sort of the first customer. They also can innovate and use local innovators to help them to innovate. So it's not just about looking at angel investment, seed funding, venture funding, etc. It's also about thinking about your own role as an organisation, and the power that you have with your purchasing and your contracts and your infrastructure. And there may also be opportunities there to support local innovation to solve some of the local problems, and we'll come on to that in a bit.
So medium-sized cities can do something on the finance sort of theme, really. There's an opportunity to work more collaboratively if you have those bigger networks with bigger cities where perhaps there is more investment. It's working with them to give your exciting companies exposure to those finance networks. That's something that building relationships with other places can really help with. As Barnsley, we build a relationship with, for London, for example, which is the epicentre of investment in finance in the UK. That's a really important part of what we do. The city as well can identify the gaps in funding and lobby for interventions. I think this is quite important, that the more knowledge you have as the city about what the wants and needs of the business community are, you can feed that back into whether it's regional governance, national governance, whatever the mechanisms are. By spotting the gaps, it's a much easier case to make that gap needs to be filled. And I think what medium-sized cities can do probably more easily than large cities is be more experimental. It's not going to take as much investment to make a difference as it does in big cities. So you can perhaps look at innovative grant and investment programs, seed certain types of business that you want to see be more active. Think differently as well about what grants are awarded for. I think a lot of grants can tend to be awarded for equipment because it's a physical thing that people can see, and if the company doesn't work, then they can take it back. Being able to enable companies to invest in softer things like staffing and training and development is a really powerful way of helping them to develop onto the next stage. So finance it's not kind of such a hard and fast thing about just investment. Finance, as Alison said, it's about markets. It is about public sector grants and support. And then it is also about leading to the private sector investment as well.
But how long have we got? I'm conscious of the time, and Bella waiting in the wings.
Yeah, you've got about 10 minutes.
Okay, I might skip through the ones where, so this is one where the slide kind of says what we want to say. I think it goes, and this landscape has evolved quite a lot even since we finished, but the need to have open and accessible data so that local tech firms and tech entrepreneurs can actually access the data that they need. You know, they say data is the new gold, and a city also has a role, or the new oil. The city has a role in actually making local data available to local entrepreneurs so that they can use it to affect change.
So I think that the things that medium-sized cities can and should do, and again, reflecting back on what we're doing in Barnsley, is not just about sharing the data we already have, but thinking about how we collect data. And one of the things that we're doing is looking at how we do that through sensor networks as well. So it's not just the data that we have because we're the local authority, but what new data about people's movement through a city, traffic flow, all of these different things, what can we do with that data, and how is that data valuable? There's an awful phrase that data is the new oil. But you know, the point of that is that data has value, and it has value in many different ways. It has value for us as cities because we can refine and develop our services. It has value to entrepreneurs because they can develop their disruptive services in response to some of that data. And the more that we can work with them, the more they can potentially benefit what we do as cities as well. And I think, you know, that idea of win-wins of businesses and citizens and the city all coming together to kind of inform solutions like that is again where you get that kind of living lab opportunity that cities can begin to foster. That sometimes feels to be quite far away because it's very technical. You know, you need people that understand data to be able to be involved in that, but the collaboration is the facilitator of that, and the data can kind of come secondary to it, but it is absolutely a key part of it. And also having data on a very basic level as a city means you can make those informed decisions, and you can say, right, we know how many digital companies we have now, and we know how many we need, and if we track that data, we can show our success and our impact, and that's really, really powerful.
Okay, sorry, I misread the clock. You've got about 3 or 4 minutes left.
Okay, thank you, Bert.
Okay,
we're coming to the end here in terms of connectivity, and I think that when we're thinking about connectivity, we're not just thinking about infrastructure, and when we're thinking about infrastructure, we're not just thinking about digital. You know, medium-sized towns and cities are quite unique. You do tend to know a lot more people locally, and the infrastructure that you have to travel around the city is quite often easier for you to do. To use. So I think this does facilitate strong relationships between stakeholders, and in my experience, I mean, I live and work in London, but I've done a lot of work in small and medium-sized towns and cities, and my experience is that the local relationships are very, very strong and are a real asset for the local town and city. So moving on, I'm going to jump through some of these, but I think the key thing in terms of what medium-sized cities can do generally, we think that there's an opportunity for medium-sized cities to identify local challenges, and they could be societal, they could be industrial, they could be technological, with their citizens, and then to use their entrepreneurs and their local tech companies to try and solve some of those challenges. And I think there's a key role for local authorities and public sector to actually facilitate some of the interaction between sort of local economic, social and environmental agendas and the potential to grow entrepreneurship and the local economy. So I think that that's something that we really landed on quite strongly through the work we did in Tech Town, and the slide gives a little bit more information on what that might look like. I think as part of that, and coming back to the size of the city, like take advantage of the human scale. This does not exist in big cities, as you know, and you have an opportunity in smaller cities to drive the agenda through a more collaborative approach and multi-stakeholder co-creation. That does tend to be easier and more effective in smaller cities, and also can have a lot more impact. And I think also it's really important that you need to lead by example, and this is not easy. Like, cities do not traditionally move quickly, they're not traditionally agile, they're not necessarily even traditionally particularly techy, but it's very difficult to work with or in digital and tech if you're still working in a very analog and old-fashioned style. So I think it's important that the government itself locally also disrupts and thinks about its own provision of services, the way it also does business, and thinks about opportunities to grow local jobs by innovating and techifying, if you like, disrupting the way that it does its own work. So I'm going to skip on now. This is a slide from a Boston academic. We've got lots more information behind this, but we think these are the kind of 6 components, that are of a successful entrepreneurship ecosystem. And this is very much the sort of lens and the findings of 2 or 3 years of work. You know, it's not okay just to build a building. You have to think about all the things, all the different ingredients that are kind of wrapped around and embedded within the cultural and economic infrastructure of the city. Final slide from me, one more from Tracy. If you only remember one thing from this presentation, is this: please do not try and create an ecosystem from the top down. The best examples of tech entrepreneurship ecosystems are those where the city's played a role in creating the conditions to encourage a vibrant ecosystem to grow. And I think all of that is around co-creating with your entrepreneurs, with your techies, like find your techies and work with them. That's kind of, for me, the most important message. And Tracy's just got one more slide.
Okay, but I think we're going to skip that, if that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, you can come back to it, Tracy. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No,
That was great. Thank you very much indeed to both of you. That's excellent. So what we're going to do is we'll have questions at the end. We'll have enough time, I'm sure, for about half an hour's questions or more. So we'll have Bella now on Hungary, and off you go. And share your screen.
Okay. I'm sorry, I somehow lost Zoom for a moment, but I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I share my screen.
Thank you.
Okay, so I will talk from a different perspective, and I will talk about the journey of Nyíregyháza. That's the name of our city. It's not easy to pronounce, so I'm not surprised that Beth has some difficulties with it. Actually, most of our partners spend 2 years learning how to pronounce the name of Nyíregyháza. But it's a nice town, and we love to live here. To start with, when I heard Camille talking about your city, Walbrzych, then I realized that it could have been actually Nyíregyháza. Most of the challenges you mentioned are present in our city. But first, a few words, who we are. So as you can see, we are located in the northeastern corner of Hungary. We have a population of 120,000, so we are a medium-sized city. we've been through a significant economic growth in recent years, which was thanks to investments from big companies, multinationals, but also from public investment to improve services and public infrastructure. The unemployment rate, similarly to your city, we actually managed to reduce it to a level of 2.6%, but that's, as with you, a pre-pandemic figure. But still, it's quite impressive. And it's a nice city. It's good to be here. The quality of life is good. The public infrastructure is good. So we have all the main conditions of a good life. We have some huge multinational companies sharing with you with some automotive suppliers. I mean, we also have automotive suppliers, and I heard your city is strong in the automotive industry. You have Toyota, and we have some tire manufacturers, as you can see. So you could say it's all good, but actually it's not. We have many challenges similar to yours, like the low average annual income, and that's thanks to the lots of low quality semi-skilled jobs, just like you. We have a relatively high level of youth unemployment, but most importantly, again, similarly to you, we experience outmigration of talented young people. We lose young people, they go to study elsewhere, and they don't return to Nyíregyháza. And that's a frightening process, actually, so we should do something about it. While we have successful multinational companies, we have a weak SME sector with low level of competitiveness and innovation capacity, so that's an issue. And for quite a long time, we actually had limited political buy-in for enterprise support. And although we have a business support structure, but it's fragmented, and the organizations don't really talk to each other or cooperate. Or at least that was the situation when we started out. And digitalization and the digital economy is still at an early stage. So a couple of years ago, we actually realized that something should be done, but it was difficult to know where to start. And of course, sometimes you take decisions as a city, and sometimes opportunities find you. And that's exactly what happened with the TechTown Walbrzych project, where we were involved as a partner in this project, and we thought it's a good opportunity to learn from others, how others do, because we believe that learning from others is really important. So TechTown, you already heard about it, but I can tell you what TechTown meant for Nyíregyháza. Adapt or die, that was the tagline for TechTown, and that's in the middle of the screen. Basically, it meant a lot of learning for us. We learned a lot from our partners, not just from the lead partner Barnsley, but also from the other partners in the partnership. We really learned a lot of good ideas, good practices, the challenges they faced, the solutions they came up. It also helped us to change mindsets, and that's an important message. The guy who was involved in TechTown from the part of Nyíregyháza is now the director of the innovation center, the new innovation center, and thanks to his participation in TechTown, he really changed a lot, and his mindset changed a lot. We identified committed local stakeholders through the Walbrzych local group we needed to set up and run. And we developed an integrated action plan, which, looking back, most of it has actually been implemented, which is a good feeling. Our integrated action plan had 4 main pillars. One was awareness raising, mostly politicians and businesses. Talent attraction and retention, which is really crucial for us. Improving STEM and digital education, and network building and connecting local stakeholders. And as I understand that you already have some documentation and parts of the integrated action plan translated to Polish, so you can see what kind of projects we identified in our plan. Now, of course, a plan is just a plan as long as you don't start to implement it, and implementing it needs resources, human resources, but also money. So we tried to hack our EU funds and orientate them towards the implementation of our actions that we identified in our integrated action plan. So we used regional operational program employment pact, and we worked on talent attraction from that. We used the Hungarian regional operational program, CLRD program, and we learned certain elements of our action plan from that. We used the Hungarian regional operational program brownfield rehabilitation project to set up the building, establish the building. We run lots of human resource development projects from the human resource development OP. And we also implemented project finance, co-finance from the economic and innovation OP. So we had a building, but we did not have a business model. So how do we get one? And that's the next step. We are currently part of Tech Revolution Transfer Network in Walbrzych. And that's a network we actually transfer the good practice from Barnsley and the business model to operate our building and our tech and entrepreneurial ecosystem. This is our building, but we are very much at the beginning of our journey. The building was just opened before the pandemic, so you can guess that it's not in an easy situation, but still they are really achieving good results already. And we do not intend to stop here actually. We just received the news that our Talent Magnet project, focusing on talent attraction and retention, has been supported in the Danube Transnational Program. So Nyíregyháza will work together with cities and institutions from various Central Eastern European countries to attract and retain talent. Now, I have very little time left, but I just try to focus on our lessons. The first one is keep learning and stealing ideas. Learn from others and steal ideas from others. You cannot take over ideas and implement in your city, but you can definitely adapt them, and they can inspire them to do things in your city. Political buy-in is crucial. So we used some of the power in these projects to secure our political buy-in. I can still remember when the two ladies you heard prior my presentation visited Nyíregyháza, and we spent 1.5 hours in the office of our mayor, and they worked on and supported us in convincing our mayor how important it is to work with enterprises and help the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And it worked. It's really, really committed now. Sometimes you need some external pressure to trigger local actions. We knew we had to do something, but we did not start it until we became part of Tech Town and then Tech Revolution. You have to know and build on what you already have. We actually found lots of good initiatives in Nyíregyháza, and we are now building on them. And you'd be surprised how many committed and knowledgeable people are actually in your city. Find them and involve them, but it's not easy to find them, and it takes time to find them sometimes. And integrate and redirect funds you already have. You have lots of funds, you have lots of European funds. Try to use them smartly. But we are still at the beginning at our journey, so you have to be patient. It took us 4 years to get here, and we have still a lot to do. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Béla. Could I just mention one thing that you told me about, which is your event coming up for local regions. So do you want to just mention that to them?
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me that. Actually, in Tech Revolution, we planned it already for April, but because of the pandemic, it did not happen. With 2 other Central Eastern European cities, Bacău and Pardubice, our partners, we thought it would be a good idea to meet in Nyíregyháza and discuss our very much similar and very much Central Eastern European challenges and the solution we came up with. So we invited both Bacau and Pardubice to come to Nyíregyháza and have a trilateral meeting and then discuss enterprise promotion and enterprise support. Hopefully it can happen in the autumn. If it does, then I'm more than happy to extend this invitation to representatives from your city as well. So we can have a, well, I don't know how we say in English, but a meeting of 4 cities.
Quadrilateral.
Quadrilateral meeting and talking about Central Eastern European problems, issues, challenges, and solutions. So if it takes place, you will know about it, and you are more than welcome to join us.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, and thank you for that presentation, Bela. Okay, so now we have half an hour or a bit more. I think Alison has to go promptly at past, but we can spill over a bit if there are lots of questions. So the floor is open to whoever would like to ask questions or raise points. Yeah, Camille.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentations and showing your challenges and aims of creating incubators and how to use the potential of incubators. But from the general picture, the general idea, I would like to move on to interesting for us details. So know-how, we need to know how to do it. How does it work? So can you tell me at the beginning and answer 2 questions in terms of organization of such incubator, the building, the institution, because I understand that we have to open an atmosphere, openness, supporting each other. But I would like to ask about the activity of the incubator. So what is the organizational structure of the incubator? Who leads or who manages there? Is it the external operator or someone from the inside? Is it the city or external company? So how did you organize it? Who runs the incubator? How many people are employed? What are their competences, qualifications? And the second question, because you repeated the different talents, expertise, knowledge. You mentioned so how to find talented people and how to find talents. This is my question. How to attract them and find them, and how did you recruit such people, such talented people that are recipients of your services as well? So people who actually use services of incubators, how did you find these people? In Germany, in Hungary, I know you are just starting, but in England, you already know how to do it because we are funded by European Union. In the second part, I would like to ask another question about financing and approach to financing, but for now on, we are financed by the European Union. European Union requires aims, targets, special goals. Everything has to be measured. We need to, of course, adapt to these requirements, and every year we need to incubate 12 such companies, 12 startups. So what are the criteria we should adapt?
Good, thanks. That's good, lots of good questions to be getting on with. Who wants to answer?
Kto chciałby odpowiedzieć?
So I think Tracy probably needs to answer, or at least start the first one around how the building and the operation, the sort of detail of that. I'm happy to have a go at the talent, and Tracy, I'm sure, will chip in. And the last one, I think we'll probably do together around KPIs and criteria for selecting startups.
Definitely. I appreciate that a lot of the documentation we have that could probably really help you, Camille, will be in English, but I'm more than happy to share some things that we have locally, and I'll share them with Bert, and perhaps there might be an option to auto translate, and they may be useful. But
or
to
we
give
can
you
get Greg involved.
Yeah. So I can, things like our current business plan might be useful to see, because. So to give a bit of background in Barnsley, where we have about 230,000 people in our borough, so a little bit bigger in terms of population, but very similar in terms of being a post-industrial coal mining town. And we've been through, some very difficult times. And probably in the early 2000s, there was a real need to think about diversifying the economy and growing the higher value jobs and businesses. And we've been working on that for now 20 years, trying to effect a significant change. And that's been, in some ways, very successful. It ended up with us as the city building an incubator in 2007. It's a beautiful building, architect designed. We then gave the management of that to an external management company. And thought that company was very, very good at what they did in places like Oxford and Cambridge and huge centres of high levels of learning in the UK, which was great on paper. It looked like they could really, really help Barnsley. In practice, they didn't have enough knowledge of what the place was like, what the region was like. And because they were a business, they were focused on generating income rather than generating outcomes that we needed from an economic development perspective. We started slow in terms of getting customers into the incubator. I was a customer. I worked in the private sector when we started on that journey, and the building was amazing. The customer experience was terrible, and it wasn't a place that you wanted to spend time, and really nice architecture only goes so far in terms of keeping businesses happy. So I do have a dual view of customer as well as now the municipality. I joined the municipality 10 years ago with the role of being creative and digital sector manager. And my role was to try and encourage more creative and digital companies to grow, but also secondarily to encourage more adoption of technology in the wider business space as well. By 2015, we had to acknowledge that basically the digital media centre with its external management wasn't working. We were only 50% occupied. There were some really good companies there, digital companies, software companies, but the environment, the opportunity wasn't really coming up as well as we hoped it would. And the decision was made to actually bring the whole operation into the municipality, where we would use our facilities management and assets management functions to run the building. And I was then brought in to oversee the business support side of the building, if you like. And fast forward to now, it's worked for us. That bringing the operation into the municipality hasn't been easy. The people that manage buildings for the municipality manage them for internal customers and politicians in the main. They're a very different kind of customer to a business customer. So there has been some cultural challenge, but we now have a system that reasonably works, and we've been able to add huge amounts of value to the experience of being in the building, because we offer this integrated business support and startup support, and we're physically in the building as that business support team from the council, part of everybody's day-to-day life, really. And that model is a very difficult one. And I know from the partners that we have in our current URBAC network, it's actually just not possible to do that within a lot of European cities. You have to go out to procurement to avoid state aid issues, all of that side of things. But I do think that external providers can do a very, very good job, providing the procurement of those providers is really robust, and the measures for those providers, that the targets they've got to hit, are a really good balance of income, outcomes and outputs as well. It can't you can't just sort of drive them on one of those fronts, because you will get very different kind of setup if you're purely focused on generating income than if you're purely focused on generating economic benefit for the city. So trying to balance those things is really, really crucial. So I felt it was important to give that little bit of background before just answering the questions. But I think one of the other key things we did was move away from calling ourselves an incubator. The building was built as an incubator with tiny little offices in one part and bigger offices in another part. And the idea was your companies would come in, they would spend a tiny bit of money with a hot desk, and they would eventually become a 25, 30, 40 person business in a big office. That probably works quite well again in big cities. It doesn't work often so well in smaller places. So we pivoted and moved to calling ourselves a tech hub that had the capacity to incubate talent, but that could also accelerate talent as well. So brought in programs that could take the companies to the next level beyond startup, and really just tried to make a destination rather than giving ourselves a particular sort of banner, just to create the Digital Media Centre as a place for entrepreneurs, for people interested in digital, to come through. So we called it sort of an open door and an open mind approach, just being there with a coffee service that people can come in and have a cappuccino and just hang out in the building, as well as being able to come in for events, for activities, and for programs and different kinds of support, and also obviously pay us money to have an office, because we like it when they do that. It keeps my managers happy. In terms of the organisational structure for that, we're in the process of a little bit of change, but in principle, we sit within the economic development team of the municipality. So the team that deals with all of the regeneration and skills, as well as business support. Our bit is business support. And as well as running the Digital Media Centre, we also deliver support programmes funded through ERDF monies for SME businesses, so small and medium businesses, startup businesses. And we also manage inward investment and working with our larger companies as well. So it puts the Digital Media Centre firmly into the business support domain. And I oversee the Digital Media Centre experience, if you like, and the services that we offer. And our facilities team within the local authority, they make sure the building stays safe, stays upright, stays well lit and safe for our customers. And we're shifting now to move away from having a facilities-led reception service, for example, to community managers who will do much more than just answer phones and welcome visitors. They'll become another layer of support for the companies that we have in there.
Okay, could you wrap up a bit? I mean, it's a good answer, but we're going to,
Alison's
going to come in.
Yeah. I mean, we can, because I think it's probably worth me sharing the business plan on that one, but
yeah,
just to finish up in terms of the criteria for the startups, because we don't have a pure incubation program anymore, our criteria is sector-based, so we want companies of any age coming into the hub, and then we identify the ones that have got the potential to be more intensively supported and grow, and we put a bespoke package of support around those companies.
Great, thank you. Alison, are you coming?
So yeah, maybe I'll come in on the second two, because I think Tracy's way more qualified than I am to deal about the operational side. But on the talent side, I mean, I think this is probably the hardest bit, in my opinion, for small and medium-sized towns and cities. And I don't think we've got all the answers at all. It's an ongoing challenge across the UK, and probably an even greater challenge with us leaving the European Union. So I don't think we do have the answers on that, but I think some of what Tracy's talked about in terms of positioning, reputation, networking, all of those things have been really, really important to Barnsley's success. So Barnsley is not a big place. It's not well known, even in the UK. The people who know it probably don't have a very positive, sorry Tracy, probably don't have a very positive view of it, or didn't. And I think it's safe to say that the work that Tracy and her team have done around digital and media, and around the Digital Media Centre in particular, has transformed many people's views of what it might be like to work and live in Barnsley. They also have a very strong alumni network. It's informal, it's not formalized, but people do have a sort of passion, and their heart doesn't really leave the city when they leave the city physically. And I think that Barnsley has sort of profited a little bit from that emotional attachment to the city. But I think Tracy and her team, Tracy in particular, works very, very hard to establish national and international networks. I mean, Tracy's constantly coming to London, constantly visiting other cities in the north, constantly out there banging the Barnsley drum. And it's taken a long time. You know, Tracy's obviously been in post for 10 years, but really genuinely that has made a difference. People are opening their eyes. They realise now, with the possibility to work anywhere, oh, you know, that place Barnsley, they're doing really well. What can we learn from them? And it's that kind of ability to set yourself apart from what neighbouring towns and cities are doing, which I think will make the difference to attracting talent, old and new. So lifestyle, networking, relationships, reputation and positioning are the things that I kind of wrote down for that one. In terms of, and I think Bella probably might come in on the talent as well in a bit, but in terms of the criteria for selecting startups, I mean, I'm not an entrepreneur facing, that's not my role. But I agree with what Tracy says, that a sectoral approach can be very, very useful. Rather than sort of saying this is an incubator, come, you know, have a think about what is unique in terms of your economy. You know, you've obviously got a manufacturing past, a coal mining past. Is there any legacy from traditional industry which offers opportunity for tech? Could that be something that's unique to your incubator? Is there something around, you know, manufacturing where local tech companies could work on Internet of Things, or, you know, there's so many different ways you can cut. But is there a traditional industry locally which tech could disrupt in a positive way? And I think for me that would be something that would be really worth considering in terms of the types of companies you want to approach. Obviously you'll be looking at their track record, their access to finance, all the things that we've talked about, their talent, that kind of stuff. But I think also, you know, will you be offering some degree of program around the space? Is it just space that you're offering? If you're offering a program, that's also a way of selecting. You know, how do they fit with your program? Is it acceleration that you're looking at? Is it actually genuinely pure incubation? What are the differences between those things? So I think there's a whole wraparound question in terms of what's there in addition to the space, and that will affect your criteria. But ultimately, a lot of the people I know who do select entrepreneurs and startups for these spaces, sometimes it simply also comes down to, are they a good fit? You know, will they fit culturally? Will they attract others? You know, do they have a name? How will they fit with the other people who are already here? Are there opportunities for supply chain development locally? You know, those kind of things. So, and that's very qualitative. And quite often, in my experience, these selection processes are quite qualitative. You know, you do need to evidence them, but there's also a bit of emotion in the decisions in terms of who comes into these spaces. Bella, I don't know if you want to say any more.
Come in, Bella.
Yes, thank you. I try to quickly react to some of the issues you raised. Of course, from a different position, because we just started, so we are at the very beginning of the road. But we have a similar structure in terms of ownership. The building is owned by the city, and it's the city's economic development arm, which is a separate organization, Industrial Park Development Company. That's the name, but the name is misleading. It's the organization that is dealing with economic and business development and business support, who runs the building. And as I said, personally, the director of this organization is the guy who took part in Tech Town and also Tech Revolution, which is for me an important thing, because he went through this intensive learning process and changing of mindset and changing of thinking. So this is really crucial. They have a small staff of 5 or 6 people. But they're also responsible for investment promotion activities in the city, and they just started to develop services for local local businesses, starting businesses. We've seen a good example in Barnsley how to support new starting enterprises. It's called Launchpad. So we are piloting with that in the building. We just started the process, and basically that's how they work. In terms of financing, because you asked about that as well, the building is financed from the European Union Regional Operational Program. So the rehabilitation of the building, because it was a former military barracks building. And of course, the expectation from the council and the mayor at first was that running the building should be totally funded from external funds. But we actually managed to convince them to have a basic budget for every year for the team who's running the building. Because if we force them to earn their living from projects, then they might do what is earning more and not what is more important for the city. So actually, one of the arguments we use that just take about 1% of the local business tax for running the economic development arm of the city. And then we made a comparison with the budget of tourism promotion, which actually brings in considerably less money than the economic activities, and also showed the budget of the media companies and media services the city is using, which is hugely more than the money that currently is used for economic promotion, economic development. So that's basically how it is done here.
Okay, that's great. Good. Thank you very much. Did we cover the point about KPIs and stuff before we move on briefly? Or do you want to?
Was it around KPIs or was it around criteria? Maybe I missed.
Oh, maybe,
there was a question about measures as well that I noted, and yeah, I think I touched on it briefly, but a kind of a balanced scorecard approach of not just measuring one particular thing. We've got to start with what is it, why you're doing it in the first place, and trying to map out what you can measure to show progress against that target, I think. And for us, it's a balance of occupancy, income, and jobs and businesses created and supported in the relevant sector. They're our main criteria for measurement.
Fine. Okay,
great,
thanks.
Just briefly on KPIs is, obviously it needs to be a mixture of outputs and outcomes, and that's really, really important, because if you only have outputs and numbers, like the 12 businesses, whatever it may be, you may not actually reach the outcomes, which would be, you're growing your digital economy, a more strategic approach, the impact. And I think, it really, really is important to think about what is the change you want to affect, and then think about how you're going to get there and how your outputs will contribute to that change. Otherwise, you could end up with 12 not very good companies that actually don't do anything, but you've still ticked your box. So I think, Bella's the expert on the indicator side, very much so, and he'll be able to give you a lot more detail on how that might work. But it is an important thing. Otherwise, you get unintended consequences, I would say.
Okay, great, thanks. So let's return to new questions from Walbrzych. Thank you very much for those answers. So, Camille, do you want to ask more? Does one of your team want to ask other things? You gave us a list of questions at the beginning on your sheet. Have we covered all of these questions? Mr. Urbani, Christoph wants to come in here. So, Christoph, do you want to come in? Great, hi.
Hello, everyone. I wanted to take a bit broader approach about developing the incubation in general in the city. I was reading an article about the economic situation on Walbrzych, even taking into account lower unemployment rates. But one of the theories says that economic situation will be strongly connected with is strongly connected with the housing market. So if we provide accommodation for new citizens, then the workplaces will follow. Creating new workplaces will follow. Would you say it's connected with these two things are connected in the UK or in Hungary? So, for example, do companies who try to attract to develop the city economically also deal with or cooperate in finding new accommodation or creating accommodation for these people, or is it completely separate for in your cases?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think Tracy probably would be good for you to talk a little bit about the digital campus just briefly, because that's a kind of more of a broad umbrella.
Yeah,
approach.
so part of our work currently is to expand out from the Digital Media Centre hub into firstly a second digital media centre, additionally a tech hub as part of the college, and then within the same immediate geography, a mixed use campus which will include residential accommodation, and it will be sort of the kind of residential accommodation that people working in more knowledge-based jobs would be likely to want to live in. So more contemporary housing, apartments as well as individual houses. It takes advantage of the location immediately adjacent to the transport hub. The risk with that actually is that what we get the people we get living on the campus may well be the kind of people we want to work in the campus, but there's a big chance that they will also outwardly commute to the bigger cities that are sort of 20 and 30 minutes on a train either side of Barnsley. That is a risk, I think. And when you are a second or third tier city, the nicer your housing is, the more varied your housing stock is, you also increase the likelihood of commuter usage as well if there is other big employment hubs in the area. And I think that's unavoidable. That happens, but certainly we do see some linkage between having the right residential stock with being able to enable growth in certain parts of the economy. We know that we know what the regional habits are in terms of transit times and commute times, so it's trying to address some of that so that if we've got the right kind of job in Barnsley, that people aren't put off applying for it because they can't get to it easily. So there is also a secondary part to that of transport, of getting the economic opportunity right, the residential accommodation right, but also the transport infrastructure right as well, so that people can get access to the jobs that we're helping to create. I think again it's about looking at the whole ecosystem part of economic development, as opposed to hoping that kind of developing more housing will generate a particular specific outcome, because I think unfortunately humans never quite behave how we want them to.
Okay, thanks. Alison, I think you need to go if you just want to unmute yourself, sorry.
Yes, sorry, I am very sorry that I do have to go. I've got an important call now, another important call. So yeah, thank you ever so much for inviting me.
Thank you for
it's really
coming.
good to meet everybody. Very happy to continue the conversation if that would be useful.
Okay, thank you very much, Alison. We'll seek you. All right, so yeah, Camille, you have your hand up. Camille, it's your turn. Go ahead.
Yes, question about financing. Not so much the incubator itself and managing it and its operator, but you mentioned that needs connecting the incubator and the companies that are within it with external financing institutions. You mentioned that during your presentation about Barnsley, exactly, I think. So what about Hungary? You said that there are funds being created, right, for the benefit of these companies within your incubator. So what is the source of this funding, of this financing? Could you elaborate a bit more about that? Is it EU funding? Is it state funding, or maybe regional or municipal funding? And what amounts are we talking about? Approximately, of course. What is the level of public support for the companies that you try to win for them, let's say? And what is the form of the financing? Is it grants, so non-refundable, or is it loans, refundable loans with some preferential conditions? What's the mechanism behind it? Finding financing for the companies.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bella. Do you want to pick it up?
Okay, so maybe I wasn't 100% clear. We don't have local funds for the companies, supporting the companies. What we have is available on state level. So on national level, we have all types of different funds, both grant support and preferential loans for businesses, starting businesses, growing businesses. So there's a whole range of possible funding available for businesses. Now, what we see, and that's where the role of the business hub can come in and their staff. The companies sometimes don't know about it, or they don't really understand the rule or how to apply for them. So that's probably one service, and that's one service the hub is planning to set up and launch among companies. Also, what we can see, there are a number of organizations like the Chamber of Commerce, or we have a decentralized body called State Cheney Program Office, which is mediating funds towards companies. But these organizations offering their services in different places of the city, businesses don't know about them. So what the hub is focusing now on is to bring together these players and bring together the offers they have, and so have a contact with the companies and offer them the possibility to find the information in one place. So they don't want to take over other organizations' roles. They don't want to get into the turf of other organizations, business support organizations. What they want to do is to sit with these organizations, which they already started, and agree on who does what and how can they avoid overlaps and parallel activities. So that's what is happening now. And it's quite promising. Everybody's happy about it. So everybody's surprised why we haven't started it earlier. But for some reasons, it just did not start until this hub and this guy came in and started this whole process.
Okay, thanks. Did you want to make a brief remark about finance, Tracy?
Yeah, just quickly, we have a mix of financial support. When we first started to focus on sector development, so outside of the the Digital Media Centre being built, we did have a grant programme that was funded through, I think, a mixture of local funds and EU money as well, ERDF money. We now focus more on creating value, so introducing business support that enables companies to access other sources of funding, whether they be state grants or private sector investment. Very recently, and quite timely given the situation with COVID-19, we now have 2 new programmes that will distribute 50% grants for companies that want to increase their productivity or adopt new technologies. The new technology grant will be for projects up to the value of £10,000. It'll be a £5,000 contribution. The productivity, it'll be up to a £25,000 project size with a £12,500 contribution from that programme. They're not just for the companies in the building, but what they can do is encourage more buying of the digital media centres community services. So if we have a manufacturer that accesses a grant to adopt technology, that technology may well be something that one of our community businesses provide. So there's a mixture of grant funding, business support and marketplace development that we're doing.
Sorry, I can't, yeah, unmute myself. So we've got time for about 5 or at most 10 minutes of further questions if people have something else they would raise, because we're running past time, but.
I'm keen to probably ask the question that
Okay,
I
please
asked in advance of the catch up to Camille and colleagues in Walbrzych is what does this look like in 5 years' time for you? What's the big vision? If we catch up again in 5 years, and I hope we can, where will you be as a city?
I understand that I should answer the question. The most difficult questions, these ones, but very inspiring and meaning that our vision is translated into the example. In 5 years' time, we would like to be an eco-city, but we are still want to work on sustainability, but we are not talking about it. But in terms of economic development and entrepreneurial part of the city, we want to be a city in which young people see their place of life, place for living. So if they graduate from high school and they have great ideas and they don't have internal motivation or external motivation like parents to go to university, so such people would see Wałbrzych as an area, as a place, people, because networking is very important and support and the community is also important. So young people should see Wałbrzych as a place where they can develop their own activity, knowing that organization, institutions of the city will support such people. But what about people who would like to broaden their knowledge, who would like to go to Wrocław, for example, to university? So I want these people to know when they graduate, they can go back to Walbrzych. They will find a nice flat in Walbrzych. Krzysztof Urbański mentioned this because we want to build a residential area in Walbrzych as well. Not only flat, but also develop their businesses, set up their businesses so they can live well, then can use our beautiful nature, mountains, and develop their professional aspects of life, to have their career, develop their talents, realize their ideas. This is our vision. We create a so-called chain to get to the end of this vision, to reach the vision. We set up a cooperation with Nokia, with Hetacon. So we have the meeting with creative people. Young people can experiment there. They have support of some mentors. So we create this incubator. So if there is any idea in this incubator, we this activity can be developed with the support of coaches and other institutions. And we we have some plans. We are having conversation with international national center of development to build skyscrapers in Wałbrzych. We don't have any office buildings in Wałbrzych yet. um, I mean, there is one, but in the special economic zone, but we want to build skyscrapers. We need to build some building offices. So when we will have startups, startups probably will need bigger areas because they need bigger offices. So we want to create a special place for maybe corporations, startups, maybe external institutions, and also places for local businessmen who can develop their professional activities.
Okay, thanks. So that's a very useful, interesting answer. I've just got one more person, Martina, I think, wanted to come in. Yeah. Do you want to come in? Yeah.
Good morning. I'm listening to your conversation. Very valuable remarks and propositions to develop the incubator in Walbrzych. I have two questions, final questions. I would like to ask you about specialties, because we all the time talk about IT, and for our district, this is very important. For our region, this is very important, and we focus, of course, on IT. But the question is it the only right way to go? Is it the only direction to go? Of course, in terms of the incubator, or not? And how are you sure that this business is the most necessary? Maybe other industries are also necessary. Other specialties should be developed and would be necessary on the market. But we concentrate on IT so much, and we forget about other industries that could be beneficial to local community or to regional community. And this is the question. Do you monitor in any way or coordinate in any way this incubator in terms of different projects? Like, how does the IT hub should go? I mean, do you have any speculations about it? So maybe the incubator should get more businesses from other specialties. This was the first question. The second question about networking, because you showed us the great success of cooperation with institutions. You have such networking. You get companies, you have partners, and you have the whole system, and this system works well and works efficiently. But the question is how, I mean, what was your path to create this networking of partners in the context of getting grants for the incubated companies? Because we have different incubators that provide advisory services in the offices, for example, but there are, we can go outside and the incubator can also serve services that create this networking, the whole businesses which give preferential loans, and this can. So they are available to the entrepreneurs. So this is the question. How did you build this network of partners? What were the conditions? Do you meet? Do you have meetings? Do you have conversation and discussions? Is it a flexible body or not?
Okay. Great.
How does your communication look like? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, who wants to pick that up? Tracy first, maybe?
Me to do that briefly. I think the first question about other industries and other sectors is very important, and to give some justification for why IT gets singled out for specialist attention, it is very much, I think, that if you look at some of the work that big organisations like PricewaterhouseCoopers have done around megatrends, technological advancement is a megatrend and is a global effect that impacts everybody. So it impacts every single industry, and therefore all of our existing industries, whether they're it's retail or manufacturing or logistics, will all be impacted in some way by that megatrend. We can do nothing as a city and allow those companies to spend lots of money with big companies like Microsoft and SAP, etc., to provide services to help them support their technological advancement. Or we can look a little bit more closely at what we can do locally to create a supply chain. And that is why we focus on technology. It's not just because we want a sexy tech sector. We do, we would like that, but we also want it to have a positive impact and support the resilience of our whole economy. So I think it is, you know, we're looking at like say tech as a vertical, but actually the foundation is a horizontal one across all of our industries. And I think you can bring those industries in different ways. In terms of the partnerships that we use to enable that to happen, it is hard work. It's hard work that's based on human relationships and curiosity and inquisitiveness in some cases, but also bringing good people together, so people that have their own connections that can add a lot of value to what we do. We have some brilliant connectors and networkers within our own sort of informal grouping of, we have a kind of distributed team model. Whilst, you know, we're employed by the council, we work with lots of people that's both formal and informal, so paid and unpaid, if you like. We try to bring together our stakeholders regularly, and we try to keep those lines quite blurred so that we're all working together towards a common goal. And some people will work on specific paid tasks, and for others it's more about a consultative group. But that's enabled us to build in this up over time to now having better relationships with universities, with big corporates, with other organisations. It takes time and it takes effort and it takes the right people to develop that. But it doesn't take a lot of them to make a difference. A good few people with good connections is really what you need to start with, and feed them beer and wine.
Okay, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to call a halt at that point, but I hope that the exchange has been useful for everyone. I'm grateful to everyone for taking part so well. I will be circulating everyone's contacts so that you can keep in touch, which I hope you will. But for now, I can just thank you all for coming, and we'll speak to you soon. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.